So last week we were talking about grills. This week we're going to get into starting up a small business. We're going to touch base on episode 4 and do a little deep dive on the very beginnings. Starting a business in Manitoba, isn't overly hard. I assume most places are probably pretty similar. I'm not too sure about how the states work and everything like that, but I know up here, I didn't have too much issues other than trying to fund it. But even that, right off the hop, there really isn't very much expense to it. So when I decided to start toma-HACK Barbecue as a legitimate business, I went onto the government website and decided to register my name first off. That was, kind of number one. Need the name. So, jumped on. I believe it was a $60 charge. And with that, you register your business. You get the name. You get your... I just registered as a sole proprietor because that's realistically all I needed. It might change in the future, but as of right now, it's still just a sole proprietorship. So that was the beginning of that. So regardless of what business you're looking to get into, the steps are all the same. Small business is small business. So, once you have your name, you have your business number, then you get your tax numbers and stuff like that. GST number, that was important. Got that going. Just for purchasing, when you purchase your own products, you're tax exempt on certain things so that you can retail them. Collect taxes, the government knows what's going on. They all want their cut. It's just a plain fact. So, you get that done. Now for me, my steps were a little different because when I registered, I was importing rubs from the States. As you guys remember, I was bringing in Neil Serap and White Bull's Barbecue. I didn't have rubs yet when I first started. So for that, there's an extra step. I needed an import-export license. So once I had the business registered and I had my business number, I was able to apply to get an import-export number, which is basically the same thing. You take your business number and you end it with something a little bit different, but it's all registered. So now legally I can sell into the States, I can import from the States into Canada, I can do pretty much anything in Canada and US. So with that done, the next step was figuring out what I'm going to do. For me, it was relatively easy. I was already importing and exporting, working on that. Regardless of what you're doing for a business, you should have a general idea prior to. I had talked to Neil, I had talked to Chris prior to starting this business. They were both on board with what I was trying to do and import their products and sell them across Canada. So, unfortunately, with brokerage fees and everything like that, because you do need a broker to import, for duty, for taxes, stuff like that, because the U.S. works differently than Canada. Between everything, it's a tough go as a small business importing and exporting. I didn't have a lot of cash at that point. I was working with what I had. I had opened up my own business bank account. I'd thrown a couple $100 in there that I had to spare that I had saved up for a little bit, put that in there and started to work with that. So I had grown this to, whatever, not very much. I think my profit margins on the imported bottles by the time it was all said and done were only maybe like $1.50, $2 tops. When you're talking, you're selling bottles for $16 and your margin, you're only making $1.50 to $2 a bottle. You can imagine it's quite hard to make profit and make a sustainable business. I had the website up. I was paying for it. I'm paying for an email address so that my domain on the very end of it is my own. Things like that. So there are some expenses to it. But, it kind of comes with the territory. So now, we are going to COVID lockdown. Everything's done. No more catering. Importing isn't exactly profitable. What do I do? So I'm talking to a buddy of mine online, Dale over at Fat Dad Barbecue, phenomenal guy. He's helped me through a lot of business and, a lot of steps through this. He tells me, well, start your own rubs. What do I know about starting rubs? Like, I'm no co-packer. I don't have a commercial kitchen to do all these things, and I don't have the equipment and whatever. And he's like, well, figure it out. Okay. So I start doing my research. Where do you get a co-packer? How do you get a co-packer? Who is a co-packer? So, good old Google, start searching, start figuring this out. Turns out co-packers, they want huge, huge numbers. You're looking at 500 pounds, 1,000 pounds at a time. I can't do that, unfortunately. That's not what I'm aiming for. It's just impossible at this point. So, I figure out private labels. That's where it's at. Private labels is the exact same thing. It's a smaller company that is willing to blend, bottle, label, do everything for you, but in smaller batches. So I found a company that was a great start. They were able to do as little as 5 pounds per batch, which was amazing because, I've only got enough money to maybe do a dozen bottles, which conveniently I did a dozen bottles of 3 different blends. So I've got my recipes. I've had them for years. I've been using them for years. Never had any complaints with my barbecue. People love them. So I send, these recipes. Actually, first off, I had to write these recipes because it was all just off the top of my head. I knew just by looking, smelling, tasting. So now I got to figure out measurements. So I start measuring it out, figuring it out. I'm going by weight because obviously that's the easiest way to do it, and get the recipes down. Send them into this co-packer. They start making me small sample blends, sending it back. Some of them are different than what I've made. That's all based on ingredients, right? So, some ingredients are higher quality, lower quality, different ratios, stuff like that. Like, your coarse pepper might be a little coarser here than it is there. What we can buy as coarse pepper, and I noticed this was a huge one for deadly bovine, was different than what my co-packer had for coarse pepper. The coarse pepper I got was not like a cracked peppercorn. It was just a bigger chunk, and I couldn't find anything that was a cracked peppercorn. My co-packer did find that, which is what I wanted. But it changed everything. It changed the taste. It changed the flavor, like the profile of it, the texture, everything. So now we got to tweak. So we played around with it, back and forth, emails, phone calls, change this, change that, a little less of this, a little more of that. They send me another sample, not quite right. Send me another sample, not quite right. And we are working day in and day out on this. Every chance I get, I'm tweaking the recipe just a little bit because I don't want to overshoot either, right? Like, it doesn't, you can't take away huge portions of something and expect to get it bang on because it doesn't work like that. So I'm cutting back a little bit, or I'm adding a little bit. So we finally get these 3 blends just right. Deadly Bovine, A Sweet Heat, Just Giver. Okay, perfect. These guys are going to do everything else for me. They'll blend, they'll bottle, they'll seal, they'll label. I mean, it's an all-in-one. I can't complain. So I order a dozen Deadly Bovine, a dozen Just Giver, and a dozen A Sweet Heat. 1,500. So a week later, my order comes in, and I'm sitting here looking at 36 bottles. The very first 36 bottles of toma-HACK barbecue rubs. What do I do now? I have no idea. I've never done this before. I've reached out to retailers with other people's products, and it was quite difficult. I was selling online, but I didn't have much foot traffic because I'm a nobody. Nobody knows about me. I've got 1,500 followers on Instagram. So now it's to try and figure out what I did with these. I've got them on the website, but nobody's buying, obviously. Who am I? Nobody. So yeah, I start reaching out to local markets. Maybe I can get into them, you know. Tried the homemade markets, didn't work. It's not homemade. So tried some of the community markets, farmers markets, stuff like that. Well, now I'm starting to gain traction. I start going, sell, a couple bottles here, a couple bottles there. Well, now my profit margins are a little better. I'm able to buy a little more. So the next order that I place is now 2 dozen of each. Perfect. So I order 2 dozen of each and I start doing more markets. And I did a few markets that year and it was a good start. It helped me get a foot in the door and get a bigger order in all at once. So now I have my very first retailer reach out to me, which was phenomenal. I really did not expect that. So they reach out to me, curious about your products. Can you send us samples? Absolutely. Send them samples. They love them. They order them. I'm floored. I have my very first retailer. Well, this is kind of convenient. Somebody's taking up shelf space in their store to help me sell. Perfect. How do I get more of these? So markets are phenomenal because it's bigger money, bigger profits, right? You're selling right to the consumer. But retailers get you all over the map. So I start emailing. I start phone calling. I've got a few more. I've got a few more interested. Start sending samples. Well, just like everything else, you can't win them all. Send out samples to some people, never hear back from them. But send samples to other people and get a call back. We would like to carry your product. Well, this is kind of cool now. I've got 2 retailers. I've got 5 retailers. I've got 10 retailers. Awesome. And I mean, don't get me wrong. They're not selling dozens upon dozens of bottles. They've got my bottles on their shelf. People are starting to see them. Some people are even starting to buy them, which is great. It's exposure. But it's not just that easy. So how do you get a retailer? You just talk to them. Just like I'm talking to you. Tell them your story. Shoot the shit. Make friends. A lot of my retailers now, I'm actually really good friends with. I've got them on Facebook, my own personal Facebook. We talk. We, visit. I'll go to their stores. I will see what they're doing, see if they need help with anything. I'm always there for all of my retailers because they're taking up shelf space for me. The least I can do is at least help them try and better their sales with this stuff. So it's not just sitting there wasting space. So now I've got retailers in Alberta. I've even got a couple in BC. But how do I get my locals? Where do I go? Conveniently, I've got a couple places right in town here that when I approached them said no problem. Now I'd like to expand. I've got a couple retailers in Manitoba. So I start going to surrounding communities, half-hour drive away. Stop in. There's 4 or 5 stores there. Maybe I'll get one. Go the other way. I went east, now I'm going to go west. Where can I go? There's a couple stores there. Just stopping in everywhere I can and just talking to these people, talking to the owners, talking to the managers, trying to get something going, trying to get them to order my products. And they are. Well, now I'm starting to gain ground. And now, winter's over, summer's back, and market's back up. Well, now people are starting to recognize me. You're doing markets in these communities where you have retailers now. And people realize, oh, I saw that label. They were at my local co-op or they were at my local grocery store or butcher or whatever it may be. I'm going to go talk to them. So now these people are coming to talk to me and we're talking. Just, not even about barbecue necessarily. Just shooting the shit, having a good time. They decide to buy a couple bottles. Well, now those people who won't see me for a few weeks, maybe even a month, maybe even more, are going to go to their local stores and pick up those same products because they're a good product. They enjoy them. And you know what? If they don't enjoy them, I apologize. But I do what I do because it's to my palate. I like the way that all my rubs are. I use them every day, all day. So I just hope, just like every other business, that my palate is alike to somebody else's palate. Now we're 2.5 years in and things are going well. You know, that's how you start is, you put a little money aside. You register the name, you register the business. Then you need insurances. You need a platform, website. By the way, Shopify, very convenient. I'm not going to lie. I use it for both my businesses and it's phenomenal. Makes life really easy. I've told a few people this. They've jumped on, never looked back. Once you have a platform, then you need a sell sheet for wholesalers. You got to figure out your pricing. You have to make some profit, but so do they. So you can't be greedy with it. You got to make sure that there's a lot of room for your retailers, and it gives them incentive to want to sell your stuff. You got to market yourself. You got to get out there. You got to talk to people. Market's phenomenal for that. You talk to so many people in a short amount of time. You get them interested, even if they're not interested. Maybe there's a trickle effect. Maybe those people know people. You don't know. You never know who you're going to talk to. So, that's kind of the basics of it. And regardless of what business you're in, this is kind of the guideline to do what you need to do. Jump on the government website, register, figure it out. Make sure that you have a niche. Make sure that there's a market for what you want to do. That's kind of about it. So, there's my story. That's the humble beginnings. And hopefully this helps a few of you get your own humble beginnings. We'll see.